look, if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity's true.
I'd love it if you could just give us a summary of what this book is about, because you go to college campuses, you present this information, and essentially it is building a case for Christianity from the ground up. So how does that work when somebody says, how do you build a case for Christianity from the ground up?
Well, if you like the book, you can really thank Dr. Geisler, who passed on about a year, 2.5 years ago. He was the one that had the outline long before I met him, and I just tried to take his outline and wordsmith it a little bit. And so all the research, most of the research he did, and what the book does is it goes through 12 points that show Christianity is true, but for the sake of simplicity, no one's going to remember 12. So when we go to a college campus, we just investigate 4 questions, Alisa. Does truth exist? Does God exist? Are miracles possible? And is the New Testament telling us the truth about the resurrection? Because if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, and Jesus really rose from the dead, then game over, Christianity's true. So we tend to go through those 4 questions on a college campus or in a church or a high school to show them why Christianity is true. Because look, if Jesus rose from the dead, game over, Christianity's true. Of course, if he didn't rise from the dead, game over, it's false. And even Paul said this, right? If Jesus hasn't risen from the dead, your faith is in vain. Now, if he has risen from the dead, then we can look at his teachings based on reliable documents. They don't have to be inerrant. We can look at Jesus's teachings and see what he said about the Old Testament and what he promised about the New Testament. And he confirmed the Old Testament as the word of God, and he promised the New Testament. And so from Jesus's teachings, we can determine, or discover, I should say, that the Bible is the word of God. Now, there's a lot of details in there, but that's basically the bottom line. And you say, well, why trust Jesus? Well, look, I just have a personal policy. If somebody predicts and accomplishes his own resurrection from the dead, I just trust whatever the guy says. Okay, so that's kind of the big picture of the book. You know, it's 448 pages, so I'm just kind of summarizing the outline. But we go through those 4 questions when we're doing it verbally. If you want the details, the book goes through 12 points that are a little bit tighter, more tight of an argument.
And what I always tell people about the book also is that you can read through the whole thing, and then likely what you'll discover is that there's one chapter that you kind of lights up for you, whether it's the resurrection, or maybe it's the biblical reliability chapters, or maybe it's the science chapters. You cover so much ground in this book that it's such a great introductory apologetics group for people to even figure out, hey, what am I interested in the realm of apologetics? Because not everybody can't know everything. And I discovered early
Right.
on after reading that book that I like the science stuff, but I'm not probably going to dive deep in the science stuff. But what was really compelling and interesting to me was all the topics around the New Testament. What did Jesus say about the New Testament? How do we know that the New Testament is reliable? So that's the area that I chose to do a deep dive and start to get other books and other resources on. And I think your book is so great because I've met people who read your book and said, man, after I read that book, I just couldn't wait to dive into the science stuff because that's what really just sort of came alive for them. So again, great book to get. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.